All right, today we're diving into something wild. A strange experiment that happened back on August 19th, 2025. And get this, it wasn't in some high-tech lab. It was in a school. This story is the key to unlocking a really powerful and kind of scary framework for information warfare. So what are we talking about here? It's a strategy called the IEE framework. That stands for Identify, Evoke, Expose. But look, we're not just going to throw a dry definition at you. To really get this, we have to go back to the beginning. We have to start with the story. Yeah, we need to zoom in on a very specific date, August 19th, 2025. Because what happened that day? Not in some secret lab or military base, but in a totally normal school, is where this whole thing kicks off. A school. Can you believe it? And the person at the center of it all, a school principal. Now, you're probably wondering, why a principal? Well, to get that, you first have to understand the invisible game he was being forced to play, whether he knew it or not. Okay, so let's talk about this game. It's called the Human Systems Game. And this is really the theory, the whole strategic backbone behind this entire experiment. So the core idea is actually pretty simple, but it's incredibly powerful. Think of any group of people as a human system. It could be a company, a government, or, a school. The objective of the game isn't to control everybody. No, that's impossible. The goal is to control a tiny, but super critical percentage of the people inside that system. And this is the mind-blowing part. The key insight here is that these attacks work by compromising just 2% of the system. You heard that right. You don't need a majority. You don't need 51%. You just need to control the right 2%. Okay, let's play a quick game. Imagine you and an opponent are trying to take over a school of 500 people. You take turns picking one person to control. Who do you pick first? It's a no-brainer, right? You go for the principal. Maximum power. Then your opponent counters. Maybe they pick the vice principal. Then you might grab a PE teacher or a counselor to create some chaos. Maybe even fabricate a complaint against your opponent's pick. You see? It's a game of chess, a game of influence and disruption. But hold on, what if we change the rules? Game version 2, you have to pick all your people at the same time. You reveal your whole hand at once. All of a sudden, this isn't a reactive game of chess anymore. It's about defense. You have to think 3 steps ahead and anticipate what your opponent is going to do, because your entire strategy is laid bare. Okay, now for the most dangerous version, game version 3. What if you're the only person who even knows a game is being played? Your target, the principal, has no idea. He doesn't know the rules, he doesn't know he has pieces on the board he could be using, and he sure as hell doesn't know you control anyone. The game is completely, totally rigged. And that, right there, is the terrifying power of what's called information asymmetry. So the big question is, how do you fight back when the game is rigged against you? Well, that's where the IEE framework comes in. It's a defensive strategy designed specifically to blow up that unfair advantage. And it's the exact methodology that was used in that school principal experiment. It's got 3 pretty straightforward steps. Step 1, identify. You pinpoint the key players in the network, that critical 2%. This isn't guesswork, it's deep data analysis, using tools like geospatial mapping to figure out who has the most influence and who they're connected to. See, the principal wasn't just a random choice, he was identified as the central hub of his system. Step 2, evoke. This is where it gets interesting. You present the people you've identified with information that implicates them, forcing them to react. You're not making threats, you're backing them into a corner and forcing a choice. And finally, step 3, expose. If the reaction, their choice, breaks the law, you expose it to everyone. So at the end of the day, what's the goal here? It's all about one thing, shattering the attacker's information advantage. You take their biggest weapon, secrecy, and you turn it against them. You drag everything into the light. It's about leveling the playing field of that rigged game we were just talking about. And that brings us right back to the school principal and that evoke step. How did they force a reaction from him? It wasn't with a threat or a demand or anything you might expect. No, they used books. Yeah, that's how they did it. 2 books were delivered to the principal. The first one, Miko's Secret, was a children's story, a kind of parable about surveillance. The other, Project Diastato, was a detailed expose. But you gotta understand, these are not just books you'd pick up at a store. They're strategic data bombs. They were engineered to deliver a very specific message and force a choice. They're instruments of information warfare, pure and simple, not commercial products. And get a load of this quote from the children's book, it's seriously chilling. From that day on, Mateo was the best-behaved boy you could imagine. Miko's eye would blink and hear it whisper, "Report filed, all is well." A kid being watched 24/7 by his toy, which reports on him, he ends up behaving perfectly, and the robot just whispers, "All is well." It's a terrifying little lesson in control, right? And it was delivered in this really disarming, almost sinister way. The message to that principal was absolutely unmistakable.
But here's the thing. That whole experiment with the school principal, that wasn't a one-off thing. It was basically the pilot episode. It was the test case for a much, much larger global information campaign, applying this IEE framework on a massive scale.
And when I say massive, I mean it. The sheer scope is just staggering. According to the source material, these informational data bombs, these books, have been mailed to 2,596 lawmakers all over the world. And these weren't just random targets. No, the campaign was incredibly focused on key strategic nations and regions. We're talking about the USA, Canada, Israel, Japan, Taiwan, the UK, Australia, the EU. I mean, every single lawmaker in these places got this information.
The strategy behind this is actually pretty brilliant. It's like a modern take on Aristotle's classic idea of checks and balances. Think about it. If you give different branches of a government the same information about each other, you make it really hard for any one group to control the whole story and hoard all the secrets. And this strategic thinking goes even deeper, right down to how they prioritize entire countries. This table shows something the source calls a vaccine potential score. It's a metric they used in that identify phase to rank which countries are in the best position to counter a perceived threat from China. You can see the US, Japan, India, and Taiwan are right up there at the top. So what on earth does this score actually mean?
Well, the formula itself tells you everything you need to know about the mindset here. It's basically a country's estimated yearly military spending divided by the shortest distance between its capital and Beijing. So it's not just about who has the most money or the biggest army, it's about the ability to actually project that power. It weaponizes distance, and that's why in this framework, a smaller place like Taiwan becomes incredibly strategic.
And this brings us right back to that 2% rule we started with. The big idea here is you don't have to inform everybody. By targeting just 2% of the key people who control 2% of the key institutions in 2% of the key countries, you can create what the source calls a cubic effect. It's this idea that a tiny, super targeted effort can have a ridiculously huge, outsized impact on the entire global system. Which leaves us with a pretty heavy question, doesn't it? In this age where information is so often unbalanced, where some people know everything and others know nothing, can a single, really determined actor actually put an entire system in check? It's a wild thought, and that's what we've dug into today. Thanks for joining me on The Explainer.